Hello, my name is Anna, and I'm the organizer of this Pride and Prejudice and Zoom event. I'm particularly excited about the interview you're about to see between the Tony-nominated composer Paul Gordon and his producer wife, Stephanie Kane Gordon. I saw Paul Gordon's musical version of Emma in Phoenix at the Herberger Theater in 2013, then traveled from Arizona to San Diego in 2016 to see his Sense and Sensibility musical at the Old Globe. I loved the humor of the musical enough that I purchased the cast recording on CD. The Wrong Side of 5 and 30 is my particular favorite from Sense and Sensibility, while Humiliation is my favorite from Emma. I've since been able to watch Pride and Prejudice and the 1960s staged version of Emma via their online broadcasts, and I encourage you to do the same. When I emailed to request an interview, I honestly never expected a reply, let alone a yes. Yet despite being knee-deep in filming for their holiday streaming musical, Estella, Scrooge, both Stephanie and Paul generously set aside time to answer the questions I sent them. I offer my thanks on behalf of the Glendale Public Library, and I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did.
Okay, my first question for you is, when did you first read Jane Austen, and what do you enjoy the most about her writing?
I first read Jane Austen when I was at the Logan airport. I was choosing novels because I'd just seen Les Mis, and I thought maybe I could write an opera, is how I thought of it, based on a novel that had been in the public domain. So I was at the airport attending a friend's wedding, and I literally read the back of 3 novels. And 2 of them were Jane Eyre and Little Women. And then I took the novels on the plane with me, and I just started Jane Eyre first on the plane. And by page 10, I was in tears. And I knew that this was the novel that I wanted to try, at least attempt to musicalize. And it was really difficult for me to stop myself from writing music on day one. I knew I had to finish the novel first, and I loved the novel. So I just went through it. I took notes as I went, and I just was so amazed at her writing. And it was really inspiring to me because generally I'd been a pop songwriter, and I was just writing about my own life. And I was actually bored with myself. How many relationships could I write about? Broken relationships, heartbreaks. It was just, I didn't have anything to say anymore. And when I was reading Charlotte Bronte and knew that I could take her images and her words and create stories with the music, I was more inspired than I'd been in many years.
Well, that was a good answer. And you probably already answered some other questions in that answer. So that's great. And do you have a favorite protagonist?
Oh, I love them all. You know, I certainly love Elizabeth Bennet, but I love Emma Woodhouse. And I love that Jane Austen said that in Emma Woodhouse, she created a character that only she would love. And I think that's the only thing I truly, profoundly disagree with Jane Austen about. I think Emma is an incredibly lovable character, and mostly because, like a lot of protagonists, she's wrong about everything at the start of the story. But gradually through the storytelling, she becomes self-aware. And that is what attracted me most to Emma Woodhouse and that particular story.
And that's what makes her interesting, I think.
Absolutely.
Why we relate to her so much, I think.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting writing Pride and Prejudice because Elizabeth Bennet is sort of wise at the beginning of the story. There's not a lot for her to learn. It's actually Mr. Darcy that has the most to learn in that story. But with Emma, she's really the one that needs to grow and change.
Interesting. Love it. Okay. My next question for you is, you've written musicals based on Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, Jean Webster's Daddy Longlegs, and Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, Emma, and Pride and Prejudice. All of them written by and about women. Aside from the obvious economic advantage of adapting free public domain texts, what attracted you to adapt these writers and texts in particular, especially Jane Austen?
Because their writing is so powerful and so truthful and so authentic. And obviously, you know, these are novels that have lasted over 200 years. But it's not just that. The reason that they've lasted for so long is because all of the themes that these brilliant writers take on are contemporary, meaning they were contemporary then and they're contemporary now. And I would say that's especially true of Jane Austen and how she looks at, our world socially, and how her, let me say that again, and her observance of the world, how she looks at the world, and how similar it is in many aspects to how we look at the world, and her insights, and just her wit and her smarts. As a writer, when I'm trying to musicalize a novel, it's really the wit and the smarts of the writer that inform what I'm going to do as a composer and a lyricist.
Great. My next question for you is, how do you decide what to cut and what to keep when you adapt such beloved works?
That's a great question. And
the fans of these novels are paying close attention.
Yes, I know. And I think, what happened when John Caird and I first adapted Jane Eyre, and of course that was the first novel I had ever adapted or attempted to adapt, we tried to stay so true to her work that we ended up making a key mistake, which was we tried to perform the entire novel on stage, which was very true to her writing, but not good for theater audiences. And as we developed Jane Eyre through the years to get to Broadway, what we learned was how to take certain sections out and how to just let go and just say, that's such a great moment in the novel, but we don't need it. And so we ended up cutting characters. So that when I first adapted Emma, which was the next novel I adapted, I'd already learned, don't tell the entire story. So I immediately thought to myself, I love the brother and sister, but we don't really need them for the storytelling. So they were the first characters that I eliminated. And then I remember there was a section in Emma where Mr. Elton plants riddles for Jane and Harriet, because obviously, if you've read the novel, you know that he's in love with Emma, but we think he's in love with Harriet. And I thought, I could write a really clever song here. But what I realized is there was already a song that I'd written, and there was already a scene that had done everything that song would do. It would have just been a comic song, and it would have stopped the storytelling, or it would have stopped the show, but not in a good way. So I really started to pay keen attention to, this is really wonderful to read, but I don't think we need to do this section on stage. And it was just my own interpretation. And of course, I applied that same logic to Pride and Prejudice. And it's really a major consideration, what you leave in and what you don't. So as a writer, I just made those decisions as I went, knowing that I didn't want to be in the theater longer than 2 hours, meaning I wanted each act to be about an hour and to leave the audience wanting more, but to still keep all the precise story beats that Jane Austen had set up in the novels.
And in truth, you probably could write a musical with every detail and element of the novel, but that would make the show, 6 to 8 hours long. So.
Well, in fact, that's really a great point. And I do want to do that. And I would like to take a Jane Austen novel and make it a Netflix miniseries, 10 episodes, where you can hit every single beat in the story, but it would be an entirely new way of creating a musical. Where's the act break? Where's the 11 o'clock number? You'd have to really figure all that out again and do it quite differently. I don't know if I have the energy right now, but it would be quite a dream to take a Jane Eyre novel. I'm sorry, to take a Jane Austen novel and tell the story in 10 parts.
Wow, I've never heard you mention that. So that's fascinating.
Well, it's just
for me to hear.
I'm waiting for somebody to give me the money to do that. And as soon as that happens, I will do it.
Awesome. I love that. And one of the things I do love and admire about you is you're constantly moving ahead creatively. You're always thinking of new things to do and new ways to do it. And which is really how Straining Musicals came about. And I don't know that that's a question here, but maybe we can touch upon that later or
Yeah.
now.
Well, whenever you like, Stephanie.
Because, it's really due to that model that we've been able to do these musicals and reach so many people.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second. So first of all, I've been very fortunate to have had a show on Broadway. I recognize that. But I will also say, as a Broadway composer, it's very challenging to get your work out in the world, especially for somebody like myself. And I've had great success and great fortune having my work performed all over the world regionally. And that's truly a blessing. But still, as a writer, I'm frustrated that when I write something, it takes a long time to get to the next stage. What a lot of people don't know is it took 10 years from the first note I wrote of Jane Eyre to opening on Broadway. Within 1 month, it was a 10-year journey, which is sort of the time frame of a lot of my shows. And so when we were playing Daddy Longlegs off Broadway, when Daddy Longlegs played off Broadway, it was a real revelation for me because it was a bit of a frustration. We couldn't fill the houses, even off Broadway. There was so much competition on Broadway. That was the year of Hamilton. So we were really struggling to find an audience. And then our producer, Ken Davenport, had an idea. He decided to live stream the show one night. And I was sort of half interested in the idea. You and I went to the show. We saw two guys from live stream in the back. They'd never seen the show before. And they just filmed it live as is. And there were 4 feeds. There was a feed from New York, LA, London, and Tokyo. So you and I got home from the show. And I think I said to you, let's just watch 5 minutes of it. Let's just make sure we're not embarrassed.
You were nervous. You were nervous because you had no control, creative control over it.
Correct. I had no way of knowing what this looked like. So I remember you were sitting on the couch. I was sort of sitting on the arm of the couch, and I was kind of hesitant and looking over your shoulder. And the first thing I noticed is I kind of went, this looks pretty good. Then another few moments went by and I went, this sounds pretty good. And then literally, I can't remember if you were there, but I watched the entire show. It was my own show that I'd seen a million times that honestly I was sick of watching. But I was so fascinated to see it filmed, and I had an epiphany. I went, this is the future of theater. This is how we change the structure of our industry that, quite frankly, doesn't work for most people. As we know, Broadway works for a small, limited number of people, and shows are incredibly expensive, and off-Broadway shows are incredibly expensive. I was trying to, right after this idea, I had the idea of filming Emma and trying to create this model so that artists and producers could benefit. But it literally took me 2 years for people to have any idea what I was talking about. Because sort of nobody understood at that moment that you could film a musical and share it with a worldwide audience. Because I realized that you could make theater accessible, affordable, and sustainable, which Broadway was not, which off-Broadway was not, and which regional theater was not. This was a way to create new income streams for both producers and artists. So my partners, Tom Pollum and Stacia Fernandez, and I formed a company called Streaming Musicals, where we have been dedicated to the idea of filming musicals either live or in a theater with no audience, or currently, which we'll get into later, in a green screen studio, 1 actor at a time, so that we can create musicals to share with the entire world. Because guess what? Not everybody lives in New York or San Francisco or Chicago or in London or in Tokyo where musicals are being created. Maybe they live in a region of the world where they can never see a live musical. So this is a way to create a win-win for both theater fans and producers and the artists that create the musicals.
Great. Awesome. It's really cool to have context while you're watching these. I think it's important to know um, what the impetus behind the creation of these musicals.
Exactly.
And it's meaningful, I think. So back to Jane Austen. I'm going to ask you. So my question for you is, and this is from Anna. My favorite song of yours is Humiliation from Emma, followed closely by The Wrong Side of 5 and 30 from Sense and Sensibility, because they're funny, yet also poignant and very revealing of character in those moments of stress. One Austen fan told me that Humiliation did the best job of capturing the sheer social devastation of the moment out of any adaptation she'd ever seen. So please discuss the process of conceiving and composing those two songs. Did you start with lyrics, music, or a bit of both?
Wow. Well, first of all, that's a great compliment. And
They're amazing songs.
Songwriting sometimes is luck. And I know that's a weird thing to say, because you start every song and you want it to be the best song you've ever written. And you want it, if it's a comic song, you want it to be the funniest song you've ever written. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And in those two songs, Humiliation, it was a while ago, but I felt Harriet's pain. We all have. We've all been that person that has been devastated in that moment. But I knew what I wanted to do in that moment was to have humor. And obviously, Jane Austen's humor is so poignant and works so well today. So I wanted to just try to capture it as well as I can, to be a match for it. And so I don't have a clear memory of writing the song, but I know that I wanted to make it comic, and I started just with the line and the word humiliation. I tend to try to do music and lyrics at the same time if I can, but with Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte and sometimes Oscar Wilde, they'll give me clues along the way, and just a sentence or a phrase or a word. And certainly with both songs, because 5 and 30, that was a line from the novel. And in 5 and 30, I just really liked that rolling figure musically that I did. And honestly, I didn't even know the song was that funny until we did it live at Chicago Shakespeare. And Sean Krill, who's brilliant in the role, was just like, he got these tremendous laughs. And that's always a surprise for me. I mean, I think Jane Austen is funny, but I never knew it was laugh out loud funny until we put it in a theater and people laughed out loud at lines she wrote that I thought, that's just poignant, but people are like rolling in the aisles. So comedy is always a surprise for me. I mean, I always lean towards comedy. I want to try to make it funny or just have it lean that way, but the audience always surprises me. I don't know if that was exactly the answer to the question, but there you go.
Close enough. But back to those two songs for a minute. It's so interesting that you chose, and it's so cool that you chose to make those more comic, because it would have been a choice, to make those dramatic moments more heavy. And but I think the way that you made them comical really, I think it really elevated those moments, and it makes it so relatable, I think, too.
Yeah, it's funny. I've always been surprised that people walk away with Humiliation as the song that they remember. Barbara Gaines, who directed Sense and Sensibility at Chicago Shakespeare and has recently directed Emma, always told me that was her favorite song, and that was the song that pulled her in. So appreciate it.
Yeah. I think it's a relatability thing too. We can all relate to that. Most of us. Maybe not you.
Nobody asked us to dance.
Exactly. Okay, so my next question. This sort of tags along with the previous question. Is there any difference in method or approach to composing more humorous or more serious songs? And do you enjoy one more than the other?
Writing humorous songs is definitely harder. David Yazbek and Stephen Sondheim, it just seems like it's so easy for them. And their lyrics are so brilliant and comical when that's what they're trying to do. I always find that I struggle I feel like it's easier to be funny with dialogue when I'm writing dialogue. Jane Austen's dialogue is really funny, and sometimes I'll write a funny quip that is a little more modern. Or in some of my more contemporary shows, I just feel like it's funnier to be, it's just easier to be funny when you're talking, but much harder when you're rhyming. Rhyming is just hard to begin with. And our ear is so used to all those common rhymes, so that we want to try to go outside the box. So matching comedy with music and storytelling. I also don't believe so much in funny music. Like, I'm not a real fan. I don't feel like my comic songs have funny music to them. I feel like comedy works better when the music doesn't inform you. So I just feel like comic songs are more difficult in general, and I'd rather not write them. I'd rather write romantic, serious songs. But I know that, you have to have variety when you're writing shows. So those are the songs I struggle with the most.
And that's interesting because, and I hadn't thought about this, but of course, when you're writing those songs, let's say Humiliation or 5 and 30, you're not setting out to write, I'm going to write a funny song. You're writing the song. And like you said, you don't know what's going to, get a laugh or be funny, but it just seems to me that you're not necessarily setting out to write something funny. It's just whatever your interpretation of those moments and how you see it happens to find sort of a humorous tone in it.
That's right, because the most important thing, my goal in any time that I do an adaptation is storytelling. How do I support the storytelling? When I find that I'm going to a moment where, I'm showing off a little bit. This is exactly why I said I didn't write the riddle song in Emma, because at that moment the story didn't need it. And if I would have written a great comic song there, if I could have, it would have been more showing off, and it wasn't serving the storytelling. So that's what I always look at when we were adapting Sense and Sensibility in Chicago. Our associate director, Rick Boynton, he was so wonderful at just, we would do readings like every couple of days, and that we would discuss what was working. And we were always focused on the storytelling. Is this moving the story forward? Is this dragging it out? What can we do to move the story forward? And that's what John Caird and I do when we approach anything we write. And I think that that's the best thing an author can do to serve the original author in telling the story.
Brilliant. And my next question for you is, this might be hard. Which is your favorite song of the ones you've written for your Austen trilogy, and why? I know it's like asking you to choose a favorite child, but out of the 3 Austen musicals you've written, you have a favorite.
As I'll just answer off the top of my head and I'll probably change my mind later, but I know the song Emma from Emma was a joy to write, and it was just very inspirational when it was happening. And I really wanted to write the kind of song that it turned out to be. So that was really satisfying. The swing from Sense and Sensibility, which not a lot of people know because we are not allowed to have the music online, unfortunately. Megan and I
is available. I believe the cast recording is available.
I think so. It may not be available anymore, but we'll find out. So we were in rehearsals for Sense and Sensibility, and Megan McGinnis, who was playing Marianne, came up to me and said, God, I really like this song that's in this moment. The title I can't remember. And she went, but I really think I need a ballad here. I think, what if Marianne had a ballad? And it was the moment where Willoughby had devastated her and she'd found out the truth about him. So I was staying in Chicago, we were in rehearsal, and I went home that night and I had a little keyboard in my hotel room. And that night I wrote most of the song just based on her inspiration of wanting me to write it, and me going, ooh, I love writing ballads, so let me write a ballad. So that night and the next morning, I wrote the song. I played it into my phone, because the way I usually write is I'll write a song and then I'll have a couple of days and I'll play it all on the computer and I'll orchestrate it and I'll present the song. But I didn't have all my gear there. So I just wrote the song pretty quickly. And I played it for everybody the next day. Megan learned it in like 5 minutes and we did a takedown of it and I played it the first few times. I'm not a good player. And Megan sang it and it was so satisfying to have had, you know, the suggestion of the song, to have written it so quickly, out of town, and just to have the singer sing it and there it is. So that was really inspiring. So The Swing, Emma, and I guess, you know, 5 and 30. And I'm not thinking of songs from Pride and Prejudice right now, but I'm sure 1 or 2 of those.
Yes. Okay. My next question is, do you plan to adapt more Austen works, or do you mean to let it rest as a trilogy? Which we didn't set out to do, which was interesting. You didn't set out to make a trilogy.
No, I didn't.
Here we are, and we have one.
Yeah, so I started with Emma, and I was really happy with that. And then as I talked to Barbara Gaines, who at that time we had a Broadway producer for Emma, and they were not allowed to do it regionally. She suggested that I write another Austen, and we chose Sense and Sensibility. So, and then they ended up doing it, and that was an amazing experience. That was an amazing company to work with. And after that, I think it was Robert Kelly from TheatreWorks, who had developed Emma the first time, said, why don't you adapt Pride and Prejudice? And I'd resisted Pride and Prejudice. I'd been aware that there was another musical out there, and I didn't know the musical, although I knew people that had done readings of it, but I'd never heard it. And I just kind of felt bad, like, I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. But, you know, Kelly was quite insistent. He said, this could be great for us and our next collaboration. So I just decided to try it, but I wanted to do it slightly differently, which is why I made the score more contemporary than my other 2 Austen pieces. And I really loved the way it turned out, and it ended up being a wonderful experience. And then I thought, oh, now I have a trilogy, and that feels complete. But who knows? I may do another one, I may not. Honestly, I have no idea.
It would be great to have them released somewhere online.
Together. Yeah, maybe we will at some point. Streaming musicals. Can I plug Pride and Prejudice is on Amazon Prime right now, and you can watch it anytime you want. And so is Emma.
Yep. And in the future, or hopefully near future, we may be able to add Sensibility to that.
We're working on Sense and Sensibility.
Yes,
we'll
love
that to you in the near future.
That may be the next one. Question. Have you seen many Jane Austen inspired films and series? I know the answer because yesterday you were watching Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a while.
With Keira Knightley. I walked in on him watching that.
I admit.
He can't stay away.
The Keira Knightley version, I have to say, it's so beautifully filmed. It's just stunning to me, that film. I could watch it 100 times. I love everybody in it, and I love the way it looks, and I love the music. I love that little light piano score. I think is just perfect and so inspiring. And I purposely did not look at it when I decided to do my adaptation, because the first 20 times I watched it, I had no idea I was going to adapt it. I did go and watch the PBS version, the Colin Firth version, which I also love, which is sort of more helpful because they sort of outline the story you should tell in a way. But I also love Ang Lee's version of Sense and Sensibility. That might be my favorite adaptation. It's just breathtaking. And Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet. It's just almost a perfect film to me in every respect. And what am I leaving out? Emma, the movie Emma. I mean, that actually triggered me going, why isn't this a musical? I'd never read the novel. I wasn't really that familiar with the story. And then I watched the Kate Beckinsale version, which I also really loved. Yeah, well, she was my favorite Emma, for sure. And that was a great adaptation. And then there's been another more recent PBS that was very serious, which I also like. I mean, it's just a great story. It would be hard to ruin it. I mean, Clueless is great. So
Yeah. Yes. And next question is, if you could go back and change one thing about any of the 3 Jane Austen musicals you've already created, would you? And if so, what would it be?
Well, I'm the kind of person that if I see my work a month later or 2 months later or a year later, I will always see ways that I could improve it. So so the answer is yes, and there's probably too many to talk about. And, you know, I'm my own worst critic. I have trouble looking at my work after I've done it because I find so many things that should be better. So John Caird and I have come up with a term called CDBs, and we mostly have it for lyric. And
could do better.
Yeah, yes, it's short for could do better. And it doesn't mean like, I don't really know why I don't like that line, but it's a CDB. Like, I don't have a specific reason. Like, yeah, it works, but it's just a CDB. You could do better. So I basically feel that way about most of my work.
Yeah. And what's it like, you know, I know you said you don't watch before you write a show. You stay away from obviously watching any of that.
Other than the novel,
yes.
Of course.
But what is it like? And I've never asked you this. What is it like when you're watching, like you were just watching Pride and Prejudice? What is it like watching or revisiting it after you've written the show? What goes through your mind as you're watching? Are you able to watch it just completely unfiltered, or are your wheels kind of spinning?
Yeah, that's a great question, because literally when you walked in yesterday and I was watching Pride and Prejudice, that was the first time that I had seen it since my adaptation. And I was just enthralled with it, as I was saying earlier. And I wasn't really comparing the two. I mean, what you can do in film with the camera and those visuals is, you know, you can't accomplish that on stage. So there was not that comparison. The only thing that I noticed in the film that struck me, because I know the novel so well now, much better than I did before I'd seen the film, is that the writer had changed a lot of the dialogue. And a few times I went, why did you change that line? Jane Austen wrote it better. I kept the original. So I had a few of those moments where I know that sometimes the screenwriter will want to clarify an Austen line, because sometimes the language can be complicated. But what I would generally do would potentially leave out a sentence or two and just keep the key line in her own words. And I notice sometimes screenwriters just do their own versions. And that's sort of what I do in the songs. In the songs, you know, you can't rhyme her prose. So that's when I take off and make it almost completely my own. But when I'm writing Austen dialogue, I'm trying to use as much of her dialogue, because why would you change it, as I can that makes sense for the moment in the story. I can't remember what the question was now, but
it's
hopefully.
all right, you answered it. Do you enjoy the process of composing, or are you just satisfied by the result? I've heard many writers enjoy having written far more than doing the actual writing.
Yes, that is very true for me. As you probably know, I am having
agonized
time writing than I am watching my productions or hoping they turn out the way that I want them to. And let me just say that I'm incredibly privileged and blessed to have had so many productions of my work at the high level that they've been. But as the critic of myself, as the biggest critic of myself, besides some print critics and newspapers, you know, I'm hard on myself, and so I'm rarely completely satisfied. So my biggest joy is after I've written something and I like it, and that may only last a day or two or an hour, but that's my biggest joy, is writing something like The Swing. When I got that assignment from Megan, write me a ballad, it was pure joy and franticness writing it. And then hearing her sing it the next day, I mean, that's the best. When you're in the middle of a show, we're doing a show right now called Estella, a Christmas Carol with a twist. And literally 2 days before we started shooting, our leading actress said, you know what, I'm not crazy about my first song. And I went, what? I kind of like it. Pardon me?
It was a CDB.
CDB, the entire song.
Yeah.
So I frantically went into a 24, 48-hour period where I had to write the best song in the show and I had to write a brand new song.
No pressure.
No pressure. I wrote 3 songs. All of them were rejected. And then finally, the 4th song, John Caird and I came up with, and he actually wrote most of the lyric. And we came up with a song that worked. And then one of the songs that I wrote that got rejected ended up being, with a different lyric, the new final song. And that was kind of fun for me, actually. I was in just a very creative mode. I couldn't do anything else. And it was a challenge, but I like challenges, especially creative challenges.
Yeah.
So again, I can't remember the question, but there's your answer.
And with you, it's, just in observing and being around you, there are times where, like you said, it just flows. It's fun. It's the creativity just, you seem to channel it from somewhere. And there are other times where, you may not be feeling it, but you have work to do and you'll sit and do it. And, you have so much discipline. And
a lot of it is just hard work. I mean, you want the inspiration. And again, reading Charlotte Bronte, reading Jane Austen, that's your inspiration. But then you have to fill the next 6-7 hours of the day with like that burst of inspiration will last a little while. And then you realize, oh, now I have to finish it. Now I have to write a bridge. Now I have to write another scene.
Yeah.
I don't have that same inspiration that I had in the first 10 minutes, 20 minutes, hour, whatever it was. And then it's just hard work. And then it's just, as you say, discipline. And, I try to work, 10 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever it is, most days. I'm much better in the daytime. And I just sit there until I get it right.
You too.
And I sit there and nothing happens, but I sit there.
And ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know this, and why would you, Paul Gordon will sit all day long, the complete day he will take to work on a lyric, to get it right. One lyric, sometimes.
Or a couple of lines.
Honestly. Or a line, or So
it takes a long time, but I also want to say, there are songs like 5 and 30 that, I wrote most of the song probably in 10 or 15 minutes. Often, some of my best songs come out very quickly, just a piece of them. Like Emma, happened really fast. And then by the time I got to the bridge, I was stuck. And maybe that took a week. But the initial, verse, feeling of it, melody line, initial lyrics, I mean, that's so great when that happens. That happened on Painting Her Portrait in Jane Eyre. And, if I had a list, I could probably tell you the songs that happen quickly. And there are some songs that are just pulling teeth. And that they're not necessarily lesser songs, but people wouldn't realize the amount of work that went into this song and the amount of work that went into.
We wouldn't know. Nobody would know that.
No, because I just want to reiterate, sometimes I feel like it's luck. I don't know how it happens. Like, I don't know why I was able to write this in 10 minutes. I didn't pre-plan it. It just happened. But I will say that without Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Charles Dickens, Oscar Wilde, Jean Webster, I couldn't do any of it. All of it is based on their work. All of it is a privilege to have it in the public domain and to be able to go, hey, I can play with this. I can make a show. I can share it with people. Maybe somebody will like it. Maybe make a living. It's all part of it. And I feel very lucky to be able to do that for a living.
Yeah.
Or as you know, most of the time for a living.
Because at the end of the day, it is still work. It is your job.
And we have to pay our bills.
We have to pay our bills. Oh, this is, for me, a question.
Stephanie, what role do you play as producer?
It's interesting. Well, my background is in theater. Also, I was an actor for years. I say I'm a recovering actor now. I sort of retired when we moved to New York. But I feel like I get the best of both worlds because, this is our lives. Our life is our shows are our kids, Yes, so I was an actor, and now being able to see, and since being with Paul, getting to see being on the other side of the table, I've sat in on auditions. I've been in places that actors wouldn't normally get to be in. That's been very interesting, and I actually love it. So being able to be on the back end and doing some of the work behind the scenes has been really cool. And we didn't set off to do that. It just happened. We were working on Emma, and it was crazy busy. And since it is also part of my background, it just made sense to pick up some of the slack and to help out some of our other producers. And so basically, I would just do things that either people don't want to do or, just to help out wherever I can, because, these shows are, even though I'm not creatively working on the show, they're, as meaningful to me.
Yeah, and let me just say that you've been instrumental in these shows and an inspiration to me and keeping me together while I do it. And our brains work differently. And you're just good at certain sorts of details that I am not good at.
Yeah, I'm a spreadsheet person.
You're a spreadsheet
I'm a list person. I have
a spreadsheet if I tried. And your attention to detail and that aspect of it. And thank you. And
yeah.
Thank you for co-producing several of these shows with me and with our producers.
Yeah, always. And also it's been fun to be a part of the streaming musicals team on the customer service end, dealing with, we have customers, people who email, people who have questions.
Why can't you watch the show right now? Why isn't it working? Well, you haven't.
Why isn't it working? The technical stuff, yes, I'm happy to forward along
Great at that
to Tom Pollum, who is our technical genius producer. But yeah, it's delightful to be involved, in any way that I can. And I will say, I said before, I'm not involved with the creative elements, but that's not necessarily true, is it, Paul?
No, you'll always tell me what you think. And sometimes
we talk about these. Yeah, we talk about shows.
Tell the director this.
Well, yes.
And then I'll tell the director, and it's like, why did I do that? But yes, no, yeah. I value your creative opinion.
We discuss the creative aspects of all of the shows kind of constantly. So it's a really fun way for me to kind of keep up with my creative chops too.
Yeah, and just as of note, you're a pretty harsh critic sometimes. Like I'll write something and I'll be really excited and I'll bring it into you and you go, No,
CDB. I say CDB. No. No. But it's fun. We have a lot of really fun conversations.
We do.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you now. If Jane Austen could somehow see your musicals, what do you think her reaction would be?
Well, sometimes I muse on the fact that if there is an afterlife, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Charles Dickens, Jean Webster, I don't know, they might beat the crap out of me. Or they might enjoy what I've done. I mean, I have no idea, obviously. I feel that I've been really true to Jane Austen's work and really all the authors that I deal with. I honor their work. I realize I would not have a show without their work. And I imagine myself, if years from now somebody adapts my work, that I'd want them to be true to the spirit of what's been created. And I feel that is always my intention and my guidepost.
Yes, and I know you, and I know your intention is always to stay true to the voice of the author, and you have so much respect for not only the author but the characters. You treat great care.
It's a lot of work to create a musical, and it's generally a 10-year journey. So you want your source material to be as strong as it possibly can be. So really, just to start, I'm just trying to get stories that are already strong, that don't need restructuring, that don't need me to change it and suddenly do something to it, that already exist whole as they are. My job is to put it in a different form where people are speaking and they're suddenly singing, and that's weird. Like Jane Austen didn't ever imagine these characters singing other than at the piano, maybe Mary badly. So that's really what makes them so different, and that's my challenge, and trying to stay true to the work. So I hope that they wouldn't beat me up if there's an afterlife.
Okay. I would hope that as well, and I'm pretty sure that probably wouldn't happen.
I'm pretty sure all of them could take it. We'll find out.
Is there an aspect or a moment in any of your Austen musicals that you can say you're the most proud of?
There's something about the last 10 minutes of Emma that just everything just works, and it's mostly due to Jane Austen, but it's just Harriet and Emma. Their relationship is so special, and developing it. We had two amazing actors, Danny Marcus, Leanne Marie Dobbs, who just played well together. And this was Robert Kelly's production at Theatre Works, where we created the show. And we just had great comic actors with great comic timing. And I was just amazed that people laughed and cried, which is always what you want to do. You want to make them laugh and you want to make them cry. So kind of the last 10 minutes of Emma are really special to me.
Tear-inducing.
Yeah, tear-inducing.
Yes.
And
for me,
laugh-inducing.
Yeah.
Funny and
Yes.
sad, but happy sad.
Yes. You hit it all.
Yeah. Well, I helped a little.
Yes. So now I will ask you, I think I know the answer to this question. What is your favorite and most influential musical and or composer? Which I think I could answer.
Probably not. So, I mean, I'm a Stephen Sondheim freak.
How many times did you see A Little Night Music?
The LA production of A Little Night Music at the Schubert Theater, I saw 19 times. But what I want to say before that is that I only knew old musicals in these days. And I discovered a musical called A Little Night Music, and I heard the vinyl LP, and literally from the downbeat of that recording, my jaw dropped. And I was immersed in his music for probably a good 20 years, where I would almost not listen to anything else other than Stephen Sondheim and study, what he did. And I do feel he's a freak of nature. His lyrics are so astounding. I don't know that anyone else will ever be at that level again. And his music is breathtaking. His music is beautiful. So that piece, A Little Night Music, is the most influential piece to me personally. The first musical I ever saw on Broadway was Sweeney Todd, which was also an amazing show, obviously. And then in recent years, I would say Light in the Piazza is a musical that's very, very inspirational to me. Adam Gettel's work is astounding. And then you and I both have great admiration for the band's Visit and David Yazbek, and his writing is mind-boggling to me. What a great composer he is, more contemporary, but all of his music sings and is special. And he's just a genius lyrically and comically, he just has it. So I enjoy their work. Jason Robert Brown, I love his work. A lot of contemporary artists I just appreciate. And whenever I have that feeling, God, I wish I'd written that, that's always an inspiration to me.
Yes. No, I love that about you, how you always, you spend a lot of time listening to other people's music,
I do. Although I will say lately, and as you know, I mostly listen today to film composers, and mostly to John Williams, who I think is our greatest living composer. And, you know, I've been lucky in my life that I actually got to meet him a few times, and I was in a band with his son, Joseph. And I've studied his music, but I mostly listen to it for pleasure because it just moves me. It just does something physically. His music is so special and he's such a genius. And I'm not obviously just talking about Star Wars and Jaws and the themes that people know, but many more of his obscure films, where his work is just second to none, in my opinion, musically. And that's what I'm most inspired by and awed by. And I always have the thought, I'll never be able to do this, but I can listen to it and I can appreciate it and then just do what I do.
I mean, it fuels you, you know, your music and your style obviously is totally unique in your own, but you get a lot of inspiration, you know, from listening to.
Yeah, I know this might be a question further down the line, but I know we're running out of time. I feel like my first musical inspirations, I grew up in an amazing era where it was the Beatles, it was the Beach Boys, it was Motown, it was Burt Bacharach, it was Carole King. And at the same time, my parents were playing West Side Story, My Fair Lady, South Pacific, George Gershwin. I had this potpourri of the most melodic, inspirational music that I could imagine that were my first inspiration. And listen, I still listen to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, and hear John Lennon and Paul McCartney harmonize, and I'm blown away. And that's in my music. That's very much sort of a part of Pride and Prejudice. Some of that, which is not, you know, it's a little bit in Emma. It's probably not Existence and Sense and Sensibility, but that music is always in me. And I will always go back, as you know, and listen to a Beach Boy record or Beatle record and just be in heaven.
Well, we walked down the aisle to the Beach Boys.
We walked down the aisle to God Only Knows, which is one of the all-time greatest pop records.
Is that weird? It sounds kind of weird to say it, but it was really cool. It was such a beautiful moment. It was amazing. But anyway, but yes, and I was going to say that about Pride and Prejudice. What I love about that score is that you did intentionally infuse it with more of your pop background, which is so much of who you are. Look at your t-shirt. Show everybody your t-shirt. I mean, you're so informed by that, you know, by that style of music.
And I admit that I was a little nervous because of my Austen friends. And, you know, I have so much respect for, you know, the Austenites out there that revere her as I feel I do. They've just been doing it longer. And I was afraid, like, oh, this takes me out of Jane Austen. And in the theater, while we were watching the show, I feel like that might have been the case. But now that I watch it in our streamed version on Amazon Prime, I feel like it actually all works. I mean, there are sections of the show that feel like they're right from Emma or Sense and Sensibility or Jane Eyre or Daddy Longlegs. And there are aspects of the show that feel more contemporary, but they all feel like they belong to the same world. And that's due to the great music team that we had and the great actors that we had and the director that we had. We put it all together so that it felt like one thing. It didn't feel like, oh my God, I'm suddenly taken out because it's a little bit more of a rock song than a little ballad that was mostly piano and strings. I feel like what I've gotten better at is being able to merge those two worlds. My roots of pop music, where, you know, people may not know that I was a pop songwriter for many years, had pop hits and very much belonged to that world, but always had my heart in musical theater and always felt that very at ease integrating those two worlds musically and lyrically together.
For me, as you know, someone watching your show, you know, with kind of fresh eyes and ears, because unlike you, I haven't sat and labored over it for months and months and months or years, you know, and so for me, it's exciting. And watching Pride and Prejudice, for example, was super thrilling and exciting. I love that kind of merging of, you know, of taking a more, you know, a story from another time, and infusing it with some more contemporary poppy kind of sounds. I love that juxtaposition. I think it's, for me as an audience member, to me, it's super exciting. And I hope that people respond the same way. And we've seen it in Hamilton too, that I think people really respond well to that. I think,
Yeah,
that
I mean, I've always felt, from the beginning of my transition from pop music to musical theater, that a pop sensibility could live in Broadway. It obviously lived with Hair for the first time. And then when I was first writing musicals, as you know, I never give a project up. And I've had a musical that I won't name right now, that I've been working on for over 20 years. That is a pop musical that I feel is very contemporary, that I'm still working on, that I don't think I've gotten the story exactly right yet. But I've always been enthusiastic about taking that side of my music writing into my shows. And of course, I've done it with Analog and Vinyl and No One Called Ahead, and Knight's Tale, that has been recently in Tokyo, is sort of more like Pride and Prejudice, where some of it feels classical and some of it feels contemporary.
Yeah. I like that it's a mix.
Yeah, I do like.
Very unique.
I like merging those worlds.
Yeah, it's very unique to you as a composer, and I think it's really cool. And I'm not just saying that because I'm your wife.
Yeah,
but...
well.
And I will say, and this was another question that I forgot to answer earlier. The question for me was, am I a Jane Austen fan? And it's interesting because, unlike a lot of people watching this now, who I'm sure are avid Jane Austen fans who've read all the books and then they're discovering your work, I sort of had the reverse experience. I mean, I had read in school, many years ago, some Jane Austen, but it really wasn't until you and your shows, seeing Emma for the first time back in 2000, maybe 10 years ago at the Old Globe. Right? Was it the Old Globe? No, La Jolla.
No, it was the Old Globe.
Okay.
What are you referring to?
Emma.
Yeah, Emma was at the Old Globe.
The Old Globe. That, seeing the shows made me really excited about Jane Austen, where I went back and read Emma. Went back and read Emma. I went back and read Pride and Prejudice. I don't think I'd ever read it, which is.
Well, that's an interesting that you say that, because one of my goals always with Jane Eyre, I mean, not so much with Jane Austen because she's so famous, but is to draw attention to these great works. Daddy Longlegs is a perfect example of a show that I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of the novel written by Jean Webster, but John Caird's wife Malco grew up in Tokyo, and that was like their biggest novel. That was their Jane Austen. That was, their Gone with the Wind, Daddy Longlegs. And so when John Caird and I adapted it, one of the great things to come from it is that people became aware, at least in America, of the novel, in the UK as well. A novel that most people had never heard of. So that's always an offshoot of any time I musicalize something. I want to draw attention to the source material. And of course, as you say, you didn't know Jane Austen except for my musicals. I didn't really know Austen other than the movies that I had seen. And that's what drew me to wanting to create them as musicals and drew me to the novels. So however you get there, end up with Austen, it's a good thing.
Yes, well said. She asked you a little bit more about I might ask you.
Yeah, just go for it. Just ask me whatever it is.
It's very wordy. Can I just ask, like, it's a whole paragraph?
I'll just do whatever you do, and then I'll answer.
So we have a couple of more questions here, and I know we already talked a little bit about streaming musicals, but can you talk a little bit more about, one, how is the recording specifically for the streaming model different? Like, what is that experience like, and how is that different from live, not having an audience, and so what are those, how is that experience different? And
so the idea of streaming musicals is just in the name. It's just exactly what it sounds like. And with Pride and Prejudice, we filmed the production that we did at TheatreWorks with an audience, full cast and band. We edited it together, and you can watch that. With Emma, we filmed it in a theater without an audience, more like a film. We filmed it out of order, but we had all live singing. We filmed the whole thing to just a piano track, and then in post, we added all of the instruments. So two very different ways of doing it. In my current project, Estella, A Christmas Carol with a Twist, we are filming the entire piece during this pandemic in a green screen studio in Harlem, one actor at a time, and then putting all the actors together. So those are three different ways of filming a musical. But the point is that I think it's really important to try to capture these little gems. Of course, there's a bunch of shows that are going to go to Broadway and be made into movies, and we will know about those shows. But there are shows all over the world that talented people are writing that appear in regional theaters. They're there for 3 weeks and then they disappear forever. Why? Why not film those shows? Why not create a new income stream for the actors, for the designers, for the director, even for the producers in the theater itself? This is what we should be thinking about in the 21st century. We are in a digital age, and there's no reason that musicals can't be seen by people all over the world. And we can keep, and it's not tied to just musicals. It can be theater, it can be anything. But obviously streaming is here to stay. We're there. So streaming musicals is trying to create an environment where all artists can share their work in one place and have their work seen by everybody forever. Again, making theater more accessible, more affordable, and sustainable. That is our goal.
And for instance, Daddy Longlegs is the perfect example. It was off Broadway in 2015, and it played for how many? Was it about a year?
I know. I think it was about 8 months.
Yeah, and it had a little bit of a short life. But the stream, when we were able to show that of the show, we reached how many 100,000?
150,000 people from 62 countries in one night.
And that really showed us that people want this. That
it was
this
a revelation.
Of value.
Yeah.
Creatively and artistically for people.
Yeah. It was a revelation that people would watch something. Now, of course, that was for free. And what is challenging is getting people to pay for musicals so that you can create an income stream. Because obviously with subscription service, we're in an age where everybody just believes art is free. Music is free. Watching this movie is free. It's because we have a subscription to either Netflix or Amazon.
It's not really free.
It's not really.
It feels free.
It feels free. That's why when we say, hey, watch Emma or watch Daddy Longlegs or watch this show and pay $4.99, which is amazing that you could watch a musical for $4.99, people are more hesitant. So that's something that we're just trying to still navigate and find the solution for. I'm really grateful that Pride and Prejudice and Emma are on Amazon Prime, and I believe we've logged over 400 million minutes for people viewing, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a solid income stream for the creators, the designers, the actors, and so forth, but they are being paid, and that's great. But we want to try to build that up and try to create new revenue sources for artists in any way we can, and that's what we're still working on.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing how relevant this is. All of this is now during these times, you know, and just imagine if your model had already been up and running for much longer, and artists were already getting all these like imagine if it was more mainstream, your model, let's say. And artists all over the country or world were being paid through the model. It's interesting to imagine now what life would have looked like versus people struggling, you know, artists in particular, you know, struggling so much now that, you know, theater is and industry is shut down for the most part. It's interesting to imagine how, you know, a lot of that could have maybe been spared if this model had, you know, and hopefully it will be eventually more mainstream, you know, which is what you're working for.
Right, because in the beginning, again, after we saw Daddy Longlegs and after we absolutely knew this was the future, we felt a little like Cassandra. We were cursed to know the future but not be able to change it. And so for that, those first 3-4 years before the pandemic, nobody was paying that much attention to what we're doing. And of course, post-pandemic, everybody goes, oh my God, you knew all along. Well, of course we did. But it was obvious. We're not geniuses. It was just very, very clear that this is the way to change the structure of our industry, to allow more people to see more work from more artists. And it was just a win-win for artists and the community and the world. So I hope people will tune in. I hope people will go to streamingmusicals.com and all of the other services. Daddy Longlegs is on Broadway HD. There's Broadway on Demand, and there's services popping up every day. But come to Streaming Musicals and just see what we're doing and just discover this world of musicals that you can watch on your laptop or your TV or on your phone or anywhere or in the theater. And the last thing I want to say, and this is super important, is that streaming is not ever meant to replace live theater. Live theater is irreplaceable and needs to be here forever. Streaming is here to supplement it. And of course, in these times when we can't go to theater, it can be a place where we go and experience theater when we can't in a live situation. But the two are meant to work together. So yeah. I think that's really important for people.
It is really important because, a lot of people look at this and sort of compare, one against the other, but it's really not about that at all. They're both such unique experiences. Nothing will replace live theater, and that experience, we all know what that magic is. And when you're sitting in a live production, what that is with other, with community. But being able to watch it online, like the first time we saw Daddy Longlegs was so exciting. It's and being able to watch intimately like that, it really is its own unique experience as well. And they do, I think, help each other. And one of the things I don't think you mentioned, but one of the reasons, or one of the benefits of being able to stream is to get shows out there in order to get a live performance from a regional theater who wouldn't otherwise know your show existed. It's a marketing tool also, right?
Yeah. Well, it brands your show worldwide. Yeah. As an example, Emma had a few productions and then basically was in a drawer for 10 years. When I spent 2 years trying to raise the money to film it, once we filmed it and got it out in the world, suddenly licensing companies were interested in it. Other theaters were interested in it. Yeah. We had 5 or 6 productions planned this year for Emma until the pandemic. And of course, they're all gone now. And we had 1 production at Chicago Shakespeare that was cut a week short. But that happened from streaming. That happened from streaming musicals and filming Emma live. And people were aware of it for the first time that didn't know it existed. Yeah. And that's what I'm grateful to the world of streaming for.
Yeah, it's a calling card.
Yeah.
I think there's so many benefits and applications to it. And it's been really exciting and to be on the journey. And we're both really excited to keep moving ahead and seeing what we can create. So Paul, you mentioned Estella Scrooge, the musical that you've been working on, that you're streaming now with the green screen in New York. You talked a little bit about that, but can you expand a little bit on what gave you the idea to take a male-centric character and make it a woman?
Sure.
Yes.
So, as I've said, it sometimes generally takes 10 years for the idea to the production. And it was really in 2010. Actually, it was Christmas of 2009. And John Caird and I saw a Christmas musical, and it was like one of the only Christmas musicals that was playing regionally. I'm not going to mention the title of it because I didn't think it was very good. And my response was, is this it? I mean, you either do a Christmas Carol or you do this. Why not create a new fun Christmas musical, which of course in the last 5 years, many people have done, and there's lots of good ones out there. But the process of this was that I had the idea, let's do a Christmas Carol, but let's do it with a twist. let's have the protagonist be female. Let's have her be younger. Let's do it contemporary. Let's have her be on Wall Street. And then I took a nod to Into the Woods and I said, what if we took the, Great Expectations and A Christmas Carol and Nicholas Nickleby and just pull them all together? And that's what I did. And John Caird came in and he really recognized the love story from Great Expectations, and was able to give it sort of that flair. But really, it is a Dickensian mashup of the show with a mostly contemporary score. It's a lot of fun. It was 5 weeks of filming in a green screen studio. John Caird directing.
On Zoom.
On Zoom from London. I'm in Jersey City. The actors are in Harlem. The producers are in LA and Hawaii. So it was just really a crazy experience. And, we're getting the footage back now. The trailer looks great. We're really excited. We're going to try to get it out by Christmas. And it's really the first of its kind to a musical completely remotely, but at the same time, everybody looks like they're in the room together. Another musical that I've just done that I want to mention that's sort of a Zoom musical is called Being Earnest, which is a contemporary version of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, with sort of a Beatles, Zombies, Petula Clark score, meaning the whole play takes place in 1965, and the music is very much the British invasion. And with that, we leaned into the Zoom idea because it was a Zoom musical and we're in the boxes, but it's fun. And we've done that and we're releasing that soon. So those are two very different kinds of musicals filmed during the pandemic that, is content for people to enjoy until we can get back into theater.
And just as someone who's seen a little bit of the back end of that and how you guys shot that, it's pretty earnest. Is pretty amazing, and what people can do is such a testament to artists who just have to create, and whatever obstacles are present themselves. It's fascinating how you guys navigated through this and managed to create what you created. Each actor filming themselves with their phones on Zoom while being directed.
The director is basically looking at his Zoom screen, as you are now, and the main thing in their scene in the green screen is the iPhone set up on a tripod that's framed the actor. And there's somebody else in the room playing, pressing play when they have to sing. And the editing was crazy. I'm a little bit of an editor. I know Final Cut. And I did some editing on Emma and Pride and Prejudice and No One Called Ahead, which is the other piece that I have that's streaming on Amazon Prime. But this was the hardest thing I've ever edited in my life because we had to do split screen. And I had to learn what that was and how to do it. And it was just very challenging. Try to get something satisfying to look at for 2 hours or 1 hour and 45 minutes, make the songs work. So we did with Skylight Theater in Milwaukee. Michael Unger's the director, and I co-wrote this piece with my dear friend Jay Gruska. And that's really exciting and will be available to see very soon.
Yeah, and I was just going to say really quickly too, it's when you watch it, it's pretty amazing just knowing that the actors obviously couldn't see each other while they were filming,
right,
but they had very specific eye lines in place that they, for every scene, every shot, every song, had to meticulously kind of map out for the actors so that, when you're watching it, it looks like everybody's kind of, even though they're in their own little, they're square, they do, it's interactive and it feels like they're together.
Well, what you're describing feels even more so for Estella. By the way, I write a lot of musicals with E in the title, Estella, Ernest, Emma. But with Estella, the eye lines and the geometry were so important because eventually you were going to put those people in a room together. In Ernest, it's also very too, but it's all split screen. So we're not pretending really we're in the room together. You see that we're not, but it feels like we are. In Estella, it's going to look like they're really there, and we want people to go, "How did you do that?"
Yeah. And I've seen the trailer, and it does look like, how did you do that? Even though I know how you did it.
Yeah.
And that trailer will be available where will that be so people can see it?
Next week, and we're hoping, we have a release date right now of November 27th for Estella. Fingers crossed.
Oh, one quick question about the title, Anna wanted to know, was the original title being Little Miss Scrooge. How did you and why did you decide to change the title?
It's 2020, and whereas Little Miss Scrooge felt like a very clever title 10 years ago, in the Me Too movement, it does not feel as clever. And so we were really searched hard for a title. It was going to be Estella Christmas Carol, Estella Scrooge, The Haunting of Estella Scrooge, a bunch of stuff. And then we finally settled on Estella. And then it was you, Stephanie Kane Gordon, who came up with the idea, Estella Scrooge, A Christmas Carol with a Twist.
I think A Christmas Carol wasn't that already established?
Well, we had Estella Scrooge, A Christmas Carol is one idea, and then you added a Christmas Carol with a twist. When you see it, you'll know why that was such a great idea, because there really is a twist.
Thank you for the credit. I don't think there's an actual title credit
But now everybody who sees this will know that it was you that came up with that title. And with that, I think we can wrap this up.
Awesome. This has been so much fun getting to chat with you, Paul Gordon, even though you are in the next room. But talking to you this way was really fun. We'll have to do this again.
We will. Thank you to Anna and all the Austen fans out there. And we're happy to share our work with you. We're so grateful that you asked us to do this.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just keep rambling. Instead, I'll stop talking and say thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting us to participate in this event. It sounds lovely, and we're excited to be a part of it.